Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hacking Open Source Business Podcast. I'm once again joined by my co-host, Avi Press. Avi?
Hello, hello. Excited for another episode today.
Yes, and we are joined by the one, the only Peter Zaitsev, former boss of mine. Not my boss right now, but former boss. And I've known Peter for 20 years. 20 years now, Peter, right? It's been like 20 years.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you can say I'm your double former boss.
Double former boss, yes, two times. Yes, I'm a glutton for punishment. So, yes, Peter, thank you for showing up to the podcast today. Thank you for hanging out. How have you been? You been good?
Good. Yeah, just busy. I think you also know this fall is a busy conference season. So yeah.
Yeah, you were just in Turkey.
That's right. Yeah. So what was last week? I was in Berlin, Turkey, and Prague. Right. Three conferences.
Yes. Yeah. And so you were speaking at the developer. The developer conference in Berlin?
Yes, yeah, the conference for developers, or the lead dev, right? I think for for development managers, kind of for development leaders, this kind of stuff. Yes, we had our own little event in Istanbul, and then I went to their Ubuntu Summit event, right, and had the tell-all talk about MongoDB past, present, and the future.
Whoa, you had a tell-all talk? You had a tell-all talk. This is interesting. So what was in the tell-all talk? I mean, I'm really curious.
Oh, well, now I'm a founder and not a CEO anymore. I can be a little bit more edgy, right? And I can, call shit in a more smelly way than that's appropriate. And there is a lot of shit when it comes to, MongoDB, right?
Oh, yes. Well, there's a lot to unpack in that statement. Okay, there's a lot to unpack.
Look, in this case, yeah, just making sure, right, in this case, what we are talking in this case, as a MongoDB, the company, right, and its treatment of open source community, right? We are not talking about their MongoDB as technology, right? That is a different story altogether.
Yes. Well, let's shelf Mongo for a second here, because something else you said is important. You are no longer the CEO of Percona. Now, for over 15 years, Peter has been in charge of Percona. He founded Percona with Vadim. They have been peas in a pod for years and years building this company as a bootstrap company. Peter, how did you that has to be a difficult choice, but this is not a choice that was just made overnight. This has been a while coming.
Of course. Yes. Well, and it's more than 16 years.
Oh, yes.
Right. Yes. But anyway, yes. I mean, in reality, look, right. I have been reflecting over myself, right, over the last few years, right, and I think it's was always a question for me. Wherever I want to grow, right, and to become that kind of leader, right, which a larger company requires, right, that means you have a lot more indirect influence, because you actually cannot spend time with whatever, 300 plus people every day, or even every week or every month, right? I mean, you come to a point where you don't know how the people are. Right, in this case, right, and I understood that as Percona becomes larger and more successful, it will continue to be on that path, and where I and I think where my skills are is a sort of a smaller, agile startup. Kind of what was referred to, Peter Thiel, I think, as a 0 to 1. Right, that's kind of my thing, much more, right? And that I think, Percona probably will benefit more from having me in a different role, right? And that also would be more satisfactory for me and kind of bring more value to the universe too, right? If I am no longer CEO of Percona.
So that's and I bring this up because our podcast here we like to talk about the challenges faced by open source businesses, and a lot of founders out there are often founders and they become CEOs by default, and they are thinking, God, what did I get myself into? Or, is this really what I wanted from my career? What sort of advice do you have for those people who are, maybe they're in that company for 5-10 years, they're looking at where they are and they're like, this was fun, but maybe it's not as fun as it was.
Well, you know what, I would say this, maybe kind of starting from a little bit back, right? I think or at least that was the case for me, right? I mean, as you are looking at the media, right? You're looking, reading the books, right? And you have those kind of a lot of like heroic CEOs, right? Often they are well-shaved Hollywood model, right? Or on the contrary, having that very, good-looking, beard, right? And then you can say, well, you know what? I am not that, right? If you are a geek, right, you probably are going to be the different kind of CEO, right? And I think it's very good to reflect what role is right for you in a company which you created, and also how that role will be developing, right? For example, before I stepped down as a CEO at Percona, for many years, I was structuring the team, so I do have my geek time, right? Because I decided, well, you know what, I want to keep my hands dirty with technology, which may not be expected from some CEOs, right? And I built out the team which would allow me to do that, right? I probably had having probably certain things what it's expected from a textbook CEO to do, which I never did over 16 years, right? But I did some stuff which I loved, right? And which I think could provide value to a company which is not expected from their CEO, right? And I think that is fine, right? I think what I would encourage tech founders to think about is their CEO is just the title, right? You can fill that title with any meaning you want. Right. Well, within a reason, of course, right? At a certain point, people are like, what? I mean, that doesn't sound like a CEO at all, right? But you have a lot of flexibility, especially in Percona case, right? Because in Percona case, one thing I understood pretty early on, right? Or at least I believe that I am quite an unconventional CEO. If I were to take a bunch of money, I'm not sure what they will keep me for long. Right, in this case, because there has been a history, right, of VCs, getting rid of CEOs, right, which suddenly just want to spend more time with family, right, and replacing them with some more Polish folks. Right. Well, in my case, because Percona didn't raise VC, and I continue to retain the voting control at Percona, right? That was never a challenge. But I think that also makes it my decisions to step down kind of less drastic, if you will, right? Because with me still being their controlling shareholder at Percona, if shit hits the fan, right, I am in position to say, hey, you know what? No, folks, I need to come back and face those things, right? I do think, of course, that the team in charge is very capable, right? And I believe the current team is more capable than me being CEO, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't do the change. But I think that gives you that kind of an extra safety, right, in this case. So there is not like finality, oh, you know what, you do it, right, and you can't ever take it back.
You mentioned that Percona was a bootstrap company, which I think is both very admirable and also, not, most of the companies we've talked to so far were venture backed. So I want to dig into this a little bit. What was the very first dollar that Percona made? Can you tell us about how Percona first started to get off the ground as a business?
Yeah, I think that was quite interesting. So one thing I think what you may ask kind of why, right, in this case. And for me, I think what is very interesting was I was a MySQL the staff member right before I started Percona. And I think as MySQL raised VC, right? And that was like a huge change of a culture from saying, hey, you know what? We are weird kind of to revolutionize the world, right? And to do that kind of goodness and first and foremost, right? To saying, well, you know what? We raised the money and first and foremost, we had to make money for people who trusted us as first money. Right, that is a very different culture, in my opinion. Right, and I cannot say, well, I've been through, let's say, 10 startups, and that's always the case. But what I can say is, I kind of had PTSD from MySQL at that time. Right, saying, well, you know what? No, raising VC ruins companies. Right, and that is why we decided to bootstrap. Right, and by the time I probably got over my PTSD, right, we were in a shape, right, what we have been, making enough money so that journey with VC was a lot less more attractive, right? Now, speaking about Percona, one thing is important here is what before we started to go and implementing a lot of open source software, we started as a services business, right? And I think that is actually quite cool, right? Because the path to revenue is a lot shorter, but then that also means what the customers are educating you about their needs, right? And you develop market understanding much better. Now, I think mistake a lot of people make is this, right? They say, well, I am working at Google, Facebook, right? Or, you pick some Silicon Valley darling, right? And with that means I know everything. I know it at such scale what most people in this universe can't even imagine, right? But you know what? What they may not recognize is what they only understand one approach. Google approach, right? Or Facebook approach, right? All those companies, right? They have some sort of internal culture and approach, right, which may be very different in other companies, right? And that is exposure to all those kind of companies, right, can give you a really breadth of a market, right? You understand different programming languages, right, or development style, deployment styles, right, whatever. So, and I think that is very wonderful, very important, right, when you're kind of going to start the focus more on a product.
Yeah, it's I think a very common, advice that a lot of founders get that don't try to take Google's process and make that your process. It's optimized for a very, very different thing. And I think the people who, I think a lot of people learn that the hard way at some point during their company that you can't.
Well, but what I'm saying is not just that, right? Even if you look at the company which is about your size, right? The thing is that is going to be only one company with one approach, right, versus understanding all variety which exists in the market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the path to a point was interesting that, the services business is kind of a quicker path towards both revenue as well as learning the market. I think that's really interesting. Were there any surprises that you very quickly learned that shaped the trajectory of Percona as you were getting started?
Well, I think there are quite a few, right? I would say one thing I would say is it's sort of like a positive thing, right? Which I only recognize in a retrospect. It's kind of, hey, you know what? Luck is important, right? And timing is important, right? I think if you would be trying to start, let's say, MySQL focused company right now, it would be a lot harder to reach the Percona trajectory in this case, because when we started, both MySQL was kind of having it kind of heyday in terms of like a growth speed, and also with Sun acquiring MySQL, Oracle acquiring Sun, there was kind of a lot of this kind of churn in their main vendor, right, which really opened a lot of possibilities for Percona. But additionally, I also would say there have been, some key customers, right, which we landed, kind of couple of customers, right, which were, like couple of $1 million each, right, which were, I would say, like as good as you would think about the seed funding you may think, right? And that's how we thought, like, well, you know what, you want to make sure, yes, you have a services, but the margin on those have to be kind of large enough so you can invest those money, right? It should not be just enough to, for your consumption, right, if you will.
Well, one of the funny things, Avi, you asked the question, what was something you learned fairly quickly? And I like to poke fun at Peter about this, was, with his PTSD, he started off with the very anti-support, kind of like subscription, philosophy. It was all consulting. And, I remember way back when he started, he would go up and say, like, never buy support. You're dumb if you buy support. And then, like, we quickly found out that companies wanted to buy support. Like, it was the insurance. It was the peace of mind to be able to call somebody 24/7.
Well, yes, Matt, and I think I would structure that in this, right? In this case, that goes is what take you where is not took you here is not going to take you there, right? I think if you look at this case, especially because at that time, MySQL, right, refused to sell services unless you had support, right? Our kind of like opposite approach actually got us a lot of customers, right? Well, at the later time, of course, moving to a subscription model with support is funded the next stage of our growth, right? And I think in this case is what's important here is, not to be kind of stiff. Well, you know what? I am the man who holds opinion like forever in his life. Look, you had certain opinion, you've been educated, you change that. Market changes, you change, everything changes. There is no problem, right? But I think for many people, it really is a problem to say, oh, you know what? Yes, that is where I've been, but I don't think that anymore.
So you need that flexibility is what you're saying, the mindset to be able to pivot and understand that what you might have assumed or what might have been the case a few years ago isn't going to necessarily be the case today.
Absolutely. Right. And again, it may not be even what the facts changed. It's also maybe kind of what situation has changed, right? I remember, for example, one of the people were telling me, well, you know what, well, in the early days, and Matt, you may even kind of remember that, we had like many consulting engagements, like 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, right? And I remember somebody would tell me, well, you know what, I understand it's in the start, right? And then as you kind of grow up as a company, you would not be kind of interested in take engagements which are like 2 hours and less. Just too much hustle, right? You would want much larger engagement. And I was like, well, you know what? That is bullshit. We want to be young and nimble forever. Well, guess what? Right? Well, in reality, our average engagement size is much longer right now. That person was right? But if you would have been pushing that at that point in time, that probably wouldn't work.
Yeah, and speaking of that kind of like evolving mindset, and getting to Avi's point about like, starting with the services business, what sort of models like would you recommend people look at now, right? So is the service model still a reasonable place to start, or would you recommend that people start with, a cloud offering or some other offering if you're going to do a startup now, especially in that infrastructure space?
Well, I think it all depends also about how much money you have to invest, because the situation is different, right? And one thing I would say about my case, right, that was probably like a worst, right? I didn't have much savings, right? I was moving from US to UK, where I started a company, right? I just had their newborn. Well, I think she was like maybe 6 months or something. Then I was moving, right? So in this case, there have been a lot of pressure on me to actually start earning money right now, right? And I think pretty much as we landed, I had my personal sort of like a pipeline full, right? Probably in couple of weeks, right? So really, I did not need to put any like capital in Percona, right? And in this case, that's probably, unless you were kind of like a moonlighting, right? That's hard. Now, if you can build relatively simple SaaS business, I think that is fantastic those days, right? Some people do those things as a moonlighting, working for somebody and doing that, right? If your employer allows that. Some people may have savings, right? And especially like non-technical founders may be able to find some offshore team and, maybe for the 20, 50 grand, right? US, you can, build a reasonable application, right? Which may get you started, right? For us, the situation was, I think, with consulting, and I think that is still legit. Like one thing I would do if like a premium, a direct there. Consulting is try to steer people away from like dollars per hour, because that is not how you get the best value, right? And actually you focus your sort of, customer discussion, conflict, or you like it at the wrong thing, right? It's much better to think about the outcome. Hey, you know what? You want me to get this? That's fine. It's going to cost you this time. And if I am finding ways to do it faster, whatever way I do it, well, that's my gain, right? But that is also actually how you optimize the processes, tools, wherever you look at, so you can provide the better price to your customers, providing them more value and also getting more customers, right, in your services business. So
it makes a lot of sense that in a business like that, you get a lot more business and customers as word of mouth spreads. But you said that you had a full pipeline in a couple of weeks after starting, which I think many people would hear and be maybe even and like, wow, how do I do that? And I'm curious, what was the secret to getting that pipeline going so quickly? Did you already have a good name for it? Had you already made a name for yourself by then? How did you do this?
Right. Yes. I think in this case, I think if you've been working, right, it's good to prepare your transitioning, right, if you will. I think two important things are, especially is to have like a network, business name recognition, right, that's help you with customers, raising money, wherever you need. In my case, I did that. I spoke to a lot of MySQL conference. I had my personal blog, MySQL performance blog, right, which was very popular, and frankly, me just announcing that at consult, what I'm leaving MySQL and doing consulting, right, instantly get me a lot of business requests, right, job offers, and so on and so forth, right. And the second thing, of course, it's actually good to make sure you have like some financial cushion, right, some good amount of savings if things don't get right, which I didn't. But I think for me, like knowing the person I am, I operate best under pressure, right? For me, if I kind of burn the bridges, there is no way back, right? In this
Good
case,
quality for a founder.
that is how I operate the best, right? right? To be frank, but that is not, I think, universal for everyone. Some might say, well, you know what? I little want to have myself a little bit of safety. Well,
Yeah, I guess one thing that is fairly unique to Percona in terms of who we've talked to on this podcast so far, versus, I mean, which is not necessarily very unique globally, but I think you were commercializing third-party open source, which I think is seems on the face a lot harder when you don't necessarily have control over the upstream project. What was that like dealing with, say, the MySQL folks when you were at Percona? Yeah. What was that relationship like? Was it a tumultuous one?
Yeah. So first, let's go to like a first statement, right? Where it is harder. It is harder in certain cases, right? But it's easier in other, especially if you think about the services business. Right, because if you think about any, let's say, software out there, right, any big name, right? Well, engineers often tend to think about, oh, that's all about technology. We are so smart. We build this amazing widget, right? And I always like to give them, what is that, VHS versus Betamax, right, or a bunch of other examples, right? When unfortunately, like an engineer, I would love to that to be not the case, but unfortunately, it's not what the best technology always wins, right? It's the best marketing which always wins, right? And I use that kind of marketing in a very, very, very generic term in this case, right? And the great thing is if you're having like a third-party technology, then somebody else is doing a bunch of marketing for you, right? If you are starting your SQL, right, instead of MySQL, well, you have to now educate people what your SQL is, when it's better than MySQL and why to use it and yada, 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 which takes a lot of money. Right now, when Percona came into that, well, we already had an audience of people who say, wow, we already know and believe MySQL is wonderful, then we just need a little help, right? Which is makes it much easier, right, and much more affordable, right, to services, right? Now, if you think about our approach, right, is our relationship with MySQL and later Oracle. At Percona, I always try to have this open approach, right, and think is what is best for customer, best for community, right, and think this beyond that kind of, hardcore, competition for customers. And some folks played better in this case than others. MySQL, under Martin Mikas, right, and then even later in Oracle, was always quite good in this regard, right? I would come and speak in their conferences. They would come at Percona Live, right? You would go like to some, meetups and so on and so forth, right? So with engineering and community team, we had a very good relationship, right? Of course, yes, our sales team would compete. Right, and yes, I mean, probably their sales team would not want to invite me to CIO roundtable Oracle is putting together, right? But on an engineering and community team, we always worked very well. And that is, I think, is a different, for example, from MongoDB folks, right, which had like completely opposite, right? I think the first goal of MongoDB, in my opinion, to make sure what nobody but MongoDB is making any money on MongoDB, right? And the second is how successful MongoDB is, right? So they would, with Percona, right, they would not want our involvement in promoting MongoDB as a technology, right? They would not want us at, MongoDB World, right? All MongoDB meetups, they're blocked for us, right? I remember even one of a newsletter which had MongoDB advertiser once put Percona in, and they told us, well, you know what? Put Percona in. MongoDB in contacted us and to say, if you ever run Percona ad again, we're never going to sponsor you. Right. So, well, that's
Well, they even went further than that, Avi. Like they used to cancel, like if one of our engineers bought a ticket to go to their conference, they would cancel the ticket.
Really?
Like just to attend. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think like just to be fair, right? Last couple of years we had Percona engineers went to the event, right? Then it became kind of big now, right? And public, right? They probably do not want many of that, bad press, right? Or legal anti-competitive practices shit in this case, right? But yes, I mean, their behavior was very, I would say, like not very community friendly, right, if you will.
Yeah, but they spent, I mean, that's where their focus was, though, for a really long time, was building that community side out, right? But what's interesting about working in the third party space is it Peter, you go back to, luck and timing. There has been inflections on both MySQL, MongoDB, and other technologies where those companies have made missteps, where there are opportunities for companies that are savvy enough to jump in, whether that is, saying, oh, we're going to change our policies, change our licensing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Lock things down.
Yeah. Well, so in this case, why I'm complaining what MongoDB are being such dicks, right? I love them being dicks. I want them to be even more dicks, right? Because that means more business for us. Right? Like, I mean, in this case, right? So in this case, you can sort of like, maybe complaining me about something I should be celebrating, right? But for the sake of a universe, right, I just want to be more nice people and nice companies around, right? I mean, it's not about how much money I make, right? But it's just,
One of the things that I really love about the open source space is that there's a lot of positive sum thinking in this way, that, it's not necessarily about taking pieces of the pie, but rather making the pie larger. So, maybe it definitely makes sense to me that there were certain places where what you were doing was directly competitive with what MongoDB the company was trying to do. In what points were your interests aligned? Where was the pie getting bigger between the two of you?
Look, right. I mean, if you think about this case, right, especially if you look at the earlier days, MongoDB, right, is really helping to promote MongoDB, right? Especially like to MySQL users, right, and whatever, right? That's one thing. But now another thing, I think it's also would be a good question about how much are you as a company you care about good, right? Let me call it this way, right? Because it is not just about how we can help the company to acquire more market, but also how you can do it, right? Because I know another example with Oracle, Percona would be often flagging issues in Percona product. Right, in this case, hey, not in Percona product, in the Oracle product, right, in MySQL, right, and community folks, right, many management says, good, we need that feedback because we want product to be better, right? We really want to see somebody who is competent, right, has spoken that whole, so we can prioritize align engineering, right? There is other approach, which is say, well, you know what? We want to pretend that our product is a freaking perfect. It's absolute perfection, right? And anybody who wants to say otherwise, we want to make sure to shut them up, right? But what will happen in this case? Well, of course, you are not going to get a better product for users, right? In this case, and I think that is another important difference, right? And if you think in this case what we have been always doing at Percona, right, whether it's MySQL, Postgres, or MongoDB, is being very honest about product. Like, I believe that there is no silver bullet. It cannot exist in engineering because we are always about the trade-offs. Right? You want, like a big acceleration on your car. Guess what? It's going to take more gas, right? It's all trade-offs, right? the same applies to database and other technologies, and it is just important to understand those the trade-offs, right? And if you want your users to be really happy long term, right, you just don't want them to have just those shiny marketing. They want you to understand where your product is great and not so great, right, and use it appropriately. So, I mean, at least that's my philosophy. Maybe I'm kind of, old-fashioned in this case, right? But yeah.
So, go ahead, Avi.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to change the subject, so feel free.
That's fine.
Oh, okay. I'll change the subject then. So, Peter, you mentioned, like the difference of people like who want to control the ecosystem, and that being kind of anti-open source and anti that community model. Is open source dead? Does it matter anymore? With these companies focused on the more closed source or the more as a service ecosystem. Does it matter?
No. I mean, I don't think so, right? Well, what I think in this case, right, is interesting, right? Is a look at the timeline and long-term effects, right? Of use case. I think, Matt, that was you, right? Which were talking about like an attention stuff on the people and being kind of less than a goldfish, right? And I think that also applies to kind of more like universal lesson, right? I mean, I think a lot of people have already forgotten, well, maybe at least like a year ago, like a crash of 2008. Right, and kind of a laws of gravity, right, and so on and so forth, right? So I think if you look at the open source, that is also a little bit in a similar regard, right? We have now a lot of folks open source approaches, right, which are catching up. In many cases, they are companies which are losing tons of money, which are making promises they are not going to be able to keep. And in certain cases, we can see we are not able to keep them already, like with Elastic, saying, oh, fuck, we are going to double down on open, right, means, we are going to teach you open source license. Right, so that is what has happened, right? And I think people are going to get more of their education in this regard, right? One thing I think what people do not realize is this kind of like a business respect to the rise of open source, right? And a lot of that came around .com crash, because a lot of companies before 2001 they're building Web 2.1 on what? Oracle, Spark, Solaris, WebLogic, and all that kind of stuff, right? Very expensive, and right, and it is not, and it is then those expensive solutions were no more the option. Then people had to put on some elbow grease and embrace open source, MySQL, LAMP stack, and so on and so forth. Right now, if you look for last decade, at least if you think about our, U.S. market, we talk about that. Look, I mean, money was not really the concern, right? Many people could go ahead and raise a couple of $1 million, right, just for idea alone, right, and go and start easy with Amazon, right? But guess what, right? There is a difference between you being able to start very inexpensively, right, maybe for $100 a month, and being able to scale that and keep that at scale effective. Right, that is, I think, where we are going to be seeing more and more concerns. Say, well, you know what? We thought as either those, cloud managed open source or like open core, right, or other, kind of almost as good as open source stuff bites. Right, and then people will be making a choice as well. What do I need to do? Right, do I need to let half my team go? Or do I need to have my Amazon bill? That is when I think we will be thinking again, right, about, well, maybe open source has a good reason after all.
Well, so let me ask this: with the current economic kind of downturn, let's be honest, there's been a ton of layoffs announced in the last couple of weeks in the open source space and just in the tech space in general, right? Let's just talk tech space in general. The economy has tightened, and even those who we've talked to on this show and elsewhere have talked about that, where they've kind of shifted their priorities from grow at all costs to more profitable, sustainable growth. Are you saying that there's a risk inherent to managed services or as a service providers who that's their primary product? If they go out of business, you're kind of out of luck, because if you're creating database X and it is only as a service and that's how you get it, Snowflake, for example, even though I don't think Snowflake's going to fail right now, if they go away, that's a lot of data that no one can do anything with. That's a lot of things.
Absolutely. But I think here is not that is not the main problem. Right. The main problem in this case is if you're losing a lot of money, right, you may say somebody come in and say, you know what, it's time to stop losing money, right? And what we're going to do is we are going to, quadruple our customer prices. And guess what? They're going to hate us for us, but you know what? Fuck them, because it beats going bankrupt. Right, and I think if you are locked into Snowflake or something else, well, you know what? You literally have no other choice. Where in open source, I think that is the main thing, is what there is a balance of power. Right? I mean, you are choosing somebody to be your partner, right? But if that partner chooses to be abusive, you kind of walk away. Right, and I'm not talking about the marriage here, right? I am, even though it sounds like it, right? But I am talking about the, in my opinion, like the good balanced relationship you want to strive in your business, right, or other part of your life.
Can you? I mean, it's interesting because, when we talk about whether it's open core or the business models that have the cloud offering, a lot of times the feature sets that's baked into the paid offerings are there to try and prevent you from going to the open source route.
Absolutely. So, well, but that is exactly what it's not open source, right? And that is where open core, right, is a pretty much proprietary software. Right. I mean, I think, yes, that is something what you need to understand, what it may like to be sold as almost as good as open source, but that is kind of your old shareware after a different name. When a product which is free is pretty much useless. And it is not an accident. It's designed to be useless for anybody who is doing serious stuff with it. Right, because that's how those products are designed. Hey, get, let's say, kids, get people, playing with toys to use our kind of free versions, start adopting it. And then when it really reaches the scale, we get people to go ahead and be forced to use that paid version, right? Well,
do you think that approach works fundamentally?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's a kind of look. I think what that approach has generally worked for a long time, right? And I think we have like a lot of freemium products out there in SaaS, right, which are not open source as well, right, where you get like a very small amount of space free, right, or whatever. Look, and I don't think that is is anywhere like a bad or unfair, right? I just think that creates that imbalance of power that is not open source, right? And I think in certain conditions that is going to bite you in the ass, right? And that's why you maybe want to think about it.
So I guess what would you say to people who are thinking about doing something like that in their project? If they're trying to think of how much do we keep in the free and open source version, how much do we put into like our cloud offering or whatever that might look like. What would your guidance be?
What I think in this case, first of all, right, I think not everybody has this kind of like a freedom of ethics or morality, right? Because as the ultimate shareholders in many cases, I do have in Percona about freedom. Hey, you know what? How much, what you want to do, right, and what we just don't think is, good for universe, right? Even though it may make us more money. In our cases, if it's public company, you may not have that choice, right? Pretty much. So you have to understand what choices are available, right? Now, I think there are just a couple of tips I'll give anyway, right? Even if you say, hey, you know what, I'm not going to play pure play open source, I have to, make some sacrifices. Thing number one, I think, is you want to make sure you are not betraying your people, right? I think the approach when you say, well, we are building that new feature, which is not going to be open source, is actually good, right? And I think that is actually pretty cool in terms of what Oracle has been doing with MySQL, right? They did not instantly went ahead and took some feature as a proprietary. Right, that didn't happen. They just built some additional features, some of which they made open source, some of which they made proprietary, some they even made like a cloud only as their heat wave, right, like the analytical acceleration, right? There are some other people say, well, you know what, we are just going to, we thought and, we gave away too much. We are now going to take some of that back, right? That always the kind of pieces of community, right? And you always think about like, wow, what is next? What else they are going to to do to me. The same applies to the code, right? I think especially if you accepted a lot of contributions, but even without that, right? If people are building around your product, they may have embedded your product in what they are taking possible, and now you're saying, well, nope, that's not going to work anymore. That really also kind of destroys a lot of trust, right? That is like, for example, what Elastic did, and why did they had like an instantly fork in their hands? Because they essentially, left no other choice to many people in Elastic community. Right, and now, of course, like a practical advice, I think, is a good segmenting of the audience. Right, it's kind of from a business standpoint. You have kind of developers, right? If they can get what they want with minimal friction, right? That is fantastic, right? And then you get either like convenience as SaaS, or you have like some, really enterprise level features what they don't really care too much about, right? Which is paid, right? That's why if you think about a lot of in this kind of open core space, a lot of technologists think about things like security, compliance, auditing. Right, developers don't tend to care about this shit too much, right? Most of them. But your security team, right, compliance team say, oh no, we really need those kind of checkboxes, right? And they're going to pay some ridiculous money for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good advice, Peter. Now, switching gears a little bit, I need you to become Santa Peter. Okay.
Santa Peter. Okay.
We are coming up on holiday season. Whether you celebrate Christmas or New Year's or Hanukkah or whatever holiday that you celebrate, it is the gift season, right? So I'm curious, what sort of gifts are on your geek list? What would you say geeks are into this year?
Oh, what are the geeks into this year? Well, I think all geeks are different.
What did you see that sparks your interest?
Oh, well, what sparks my interest? And look, I mean, I like drones.
Oh,
for
drones.
example.
Okay.
Yes, drones are pretty cool, right? So I think there's some, new stuff is coming out this year. You also know I am in various kind of mountaineering stuff, right? So for me, maybe getting another ice axe to grind
Okay.
sounds like a good Christmas present.
Okay. Well, so what about for the, like, if you're going to go out and let's say you're going to buy a gift for all the developers at your company. What are you going to buy them? Like the developers. Let's just focus on developers for a second.
Oh my gosh, you are asking, I'm into the fun stuff, right?
Okay, so what are you going to get your developers? Because I'm going to tell you, there's 300 developers at Percona, or 300 people at Percona that are listening to this saying, what are you going to give them?
Now holding you to a gift.
You're holding me to it. Well, you know what? I am not CEO anymore. I don't have direct access to this. So maybe like some little lollipop, I think I can. Maybe I can. I love it.
Well, I'm curious what the must-have gift is, because I think everybody's a little different. So for me,
absolutely. But I mean, I mentioned like that stuff. Like so much. I am like which I think as I go through life, I less and less about stuff and more about experiences.
Okay.
Right? So
what geek experience do you wish to gift the world? Do you recommend
a gift to the world? Well, but again, in this case, like everybody likes different things. Maybe go into some, some caves.
Okay, so you're going to take the developers who are coding in a dark corner, and you're going to put them in a cave. Awesome. Great advice.
This is a fair point, though. Developers are all unique people, and I think pushing back on this notion of one size fits all is fair.
Yes. But I always forget. Was it like some European town? We have like a catacombs, which is like so glorious. You walk through a tunnel, right, and all the walls are made from their skull bones.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. I've seen that in like a lot of the older Eastern European cities. Down in Italy, they have some of those as well.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
That's like an like interesting place to visit.
Okay.
Yeah, so, you should say like, well, they're past the Halloween season now, right? So you're kind of little slow, Peter.
Well, no. I mean, like The Nightmare Before Christmas is a movie that people love for Christmas, so it's a Halloween fusion Christmas movie. That is on people's lists. I know my daughter loves it, so there is that.
Oh, yes. Oh, I forgot, Martin. Now I picked up diving recently, right? Yeah, because I dislocated my shoulder. I had to become diving certified.
How does that work? So like you injure yourself, so then you have to get certified in something else?
Well, that's right, yes. Because if you cannot climb for a bit of time, you cannot do like obstacle course running, then you had to find some other thing, right, the adrenaline junkie you requires, right? And diving sounded like a thing to do.
Okay. So those looking for a Christmas gift, Peter recommends go to catacombs and take a look at skeletons. Take up diving when you injure yourself.
No, they diving anyway. Diving is wonderful, right? I mean,
and a nice ice axe.
Yeah, ice axe. Sure, yes. If you go to a mountain, ice axe is important.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, and also even your garage, right? I think it's works as good as baseball bat, right? In terms of protecting from a zombie apocalypse. Yeah.
Right. Having also dislocated my shoulder, I will be looking into diving now.
Oh, you did? So you're diving now too, Avi?
No. I'm going to start though now. I've dislocated my shoulder twice playing tennis, and it still is. It's still a little bit of a. It's a bit of a thing still, unfortunately. Right, so stay on top of the physical therapy, everybody.
Yeah, you would surprised how long dislocated shoulder heals, right? That's kind of.
Yeah.
Well, for those who are listening, if you've got a better Christmas gift, let us know. I'd love to hear your ideas.
Oh yeah, you surely have a better Christmas gift.
What would you gift the world of developers? What would you gift the world of open source? We'd love to hear from you.
But I have something in mind. I have to say, right? If you look at for Percona, right, I got the best Christmas freedom idea. You say I don't have contextual freedom. How about freedom for Ukraine?
Oh, well, who wouldn't want that?
I think that is probably like a best gift, right, for Christmas. What folks at Percona, well, and not just Percona would love, right, both who are based in Ukraine, but as well as a lot of everybody else, right, because we have been, I wouldn't say like a sharing the burden, right? It's a hard burden to share for people who are out there, but of course, supporting our folks, right, who have been impacted by the conflict.
Absolutely. And I know, there are many people out there who are definitely impacted, and hearts go out to them. So, well, Peter, I want to thank you for coming in. We do appreciate you stopping by, chatting with us. Always a pleasure.
Sounds good. Well, you didn't ask me anything about my new company and everything, but hey, that is perhaps opportunity for another episode.
Considering
we
I
would love
said,
to have you back.
what would you like me to ask you about? And you said nothing.
Well, I thought you already. You told me, well, you know what? We want to ask you, Peter, about what does it mean, what you are.
What is your new company, Peter? Which one are you talking about? Because Peter's got a lot of investments. Which one? Which one specifically?
Well,
which one?
I don't know.
You can't just say like you didn't ask me about my company, and then like not be able to name the company.
Well, yes, but you should. Anyway, let's put it like a teaser. You know what? Besides being a founder of Percona, I also started a company called Renegade Underdogs, right? And I assume achieved the title of a chief renegade in that company.
Okay. Renegade Underdogs.
Give us the elevator pitch at least. We'll have you back for another episode, but at least give us the elevator pitch.
Well, the elevator pitch. You can think about that as sort of my micro sort of accelerator, right, if you will, right? So through which I will work in, mentoring, advising, investing in the company's open source space, as well as just some other companies which I think are fun to work with.
So it's like an advisor, mentorship, and an accelerator all baked into one.
Yeah.
Cool.
Where can people find out and learn more about this company?
Oh, well, it's renegadeunderdogs.com, if you can spell it. If not, that is a test, right?
All right, we will not be dropping a link to this in the show notes. Find it yourself.
Yes,
everybody.
yes, and then we'll see how much web traffic goes up. Definitely something to take a look at. And Peter, we'll have you back on just to talk about that because you guilted me into it. That Christmas gift to me is like guilt. Thank you.
Okay.
But thank you, Peter, for coming on. We're at our time limit. We appreciate it. For those who are listening, go ahead, like, subscribe. Tell Peter what you want from him for Christmas in the comments, and we'll make sure that he hears about it, and we'll hound him until he gets you it. So.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Until next time, thanks, everybody.